Are you thinking of owning your dream homes? EJ Investment is here for you. Secure our quality bungalows with 2, 3 or 4 bedrooms, or our story buildings 3 or 4 to 5 bedrooms at very affordable prices with flexible payment plans at our Sanyang Seaview Estate, where you can enjoy the cool breeze with modern infrastructure such as tar roads, covered drainage system, modern electrification with street lights, gated entrance with security posts, and social amenities such as gas station, shopping mall, medical clinic, park, schools, children daycare, and a lot more. Our dedicated team of professionals will keep the estate clean at all times, provide security and patrol team within the estate premises, install latest technologies such as CCTV, Wi-Fi, home network installation, solar panel, and power backup system. Also, check out for our additional home facilities and interior design service such as premium tiling, wall plaster, home landscape, fingerprint home lock, and a lot more. Visit our office at Senegambia Kololi Highway and get a free site visit tour, or contact us on 4464838. WhatsApp us on 3259220. Or you can visit our Facebook page or Instagram on EJ Investments. EJ Investments, we are first in properties.
Diwli lanni maro lanni
fop lanni
awa joni mi anda honno gerde ten e ngaldo sabu e ngaldo Ibrahima jonnal taw joni mi anda se yahay kapitiki nyawlo den ha humpondire makko est ce qu'on non e warude
waden no awa
ane ko de Ibrahima ma ko to woni
mo Amerique
ko Amerique a woni kede humpitaki fi be musibe men baluwo be andanda kala ko wawda wonde aduna si arrivi e juude mabbe a jonnay do dépassement Gambia har no weebi ayata kadi taw ko mbudi din no jawi walla no jippi be halanta ma ko kala ko falda ko sengo nyamete ili nebba maro basal pomme de terre kala ko rewi don a hendo to har no weebi kadi wona dum don tu be abe jonnira mobile phone siko dum kadi laptop kala ko wayrode dibe ay kasbawa be wawma jonnute kadi sa fala humpitade ko weebi ƴettu Google account ma joni data ton waɗa download app maɓɓe on ayiyay kala ko humpima e maɓɓe ton ɓe weeɓi yama
ka wonɗa wo e aduna on
kala ko wawɗa
a jonnanay wonɗo ka leydi men Gambia ɗo dépense
hara no weeɓi yama si ɗum non fof no neeɓi immoɗen joni mi ɗowtama ka place maɓɓe jan
waɗen joni
iya heɓa ko falata
waɗen kisam
I am Fatou Sarr. I'm the president of the CSO Gender Platform. Thank you once again, and good morning to everyone. Before we begin, I just want to read out a statement welcoming you, but also from the members of the Gender Platform. And Deputy Permanent Secretary representing the Minister of Gender, Children and Social Welfare, United Nations staff, CSO Gender Platform members, women and youth groups, religious leaders, the media, representative of the country rep of the International Republican Institute who funded this project, students, representative of the various women leadership in the country, all protocols respectfully observed. On behalf of the CSO Gender Platform, I wish to specifically acknowledge your presence and welcome you to this important gathering this morning, to this consultation in the form of a validation, to an important and historic bill for the inclusion of women and people living with disability in the political process. Despite your busy schedules, you are able to make it today. I am quite sure that this document will be enriched through your indefatigable contributions which will generate solutions to end underrepresentation of women in national institutions where major decisions that affect our lives are taken, and in political parties and National Assembly, to be very precise. The Civil Society Gender Platform on Transitional Justice is a civil society advocacy group comprising of women's rights organizations and individuals that was established to provide high-level strategic support during the establishment of the Transitional Justice Program in the Gambia to advocate for gender justice. It recognizes that progressive national and international instruments can help in empowering, protecting, and promoting women's rights. The platform considers participation and development as a fundamental human right of citizens, particularly women, young women and girls, and people living with disability. And the state has the duty bearer to promote it and fulfill it. It has been serving as a lead advocate in the promotion of women's rights, in their social, economic, and political justice, sexual and gender-based violence, for the promotion and protection of rights of men, women, and girls, in the reconstruction of national institutions and reform processes through the Transitional Justice Program. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just a short brief of what the platform is all about. And we don't have much time, but I have a speech that was brought, but since it is a short day, it's from 9 to 1, and we are behind time, I will just go on to just say what's the purpose of our gathering today. And before doing that, can I just call on everyone to observe 1 minute silence in memory of Marie Mendy, who was murdered in her home, for God to grant her soul eternal peace. Thank you very much. Amen. The purpose of this bill is to enable increment of women's representations in the National Assembly, as well as in political parties. It is interesting to note that there are only 6 female parliamentarians out of 53. In 2017, 22 female candidates contested in the April 2017 National Assembly elections. Out of all 238 candidates contested, but it was only 3 that made it to the National Assembly. And that's why it is important that we see a way forward to ensure that women's representation are increased. And that is why we have such a forum today, in which the International Republican Institute hired a consultant by the name Janet Salinjai, who is a leading women's rights advocate, and using her profession to ensure that women and girls are protected in this country. With the initiative of Fatou Manjai, Honorable Member for Banjul South. And this is our very reason why we're here today, to validate this document. So on that note, I would like to call Honorable Fatoumata Tumanjai to give a few remarks.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, women leaders here present, but so much so to the gentlemen here present, especially so to my honorable colleagues, the gentlemen, whom I look upon to support in this very important draft that we are here to validate today. I cannot but give a very special thanks to the IRI, Robina and Jainaba to be specific, and to our able legal consultant, Mrs. Janet Salanjai. Without these three people, this event would not have been possible. It had been my dream all along to come with such an idea, and I thank you immensely for making it a reality. So actually, dreams do come true, but with effort and real conversation, and this is why this dream had come true today. It started with a conversation in December between IRI and myself, and it's made a reality within just a span of 4 months. It can thus be implemented by next April's elections, inshallah. That can be possible with determination and the support of you ladies and gentlemen, but more so by the support of my honorable colleagues at the National Assembly. This welcome message should be very brief, as the talking should commence after the presentation of the draft that is long, long overdue. It started, in 1975, the discourse about women started by the United Nations, when the first decade for women was declared in the period 1975 to 1985. That was a long, long time ago. Focus was on policies and issues that impacted women, such as pay equity, gendered violence, and other human rights issues. This was followed by many more held in different countries, leading to the Beijing Conference in 1995. This conference sought to advance the goals of equality, development, and peace for all women. At Beijing, governments acknowledged the diverse voices of women. And in 1995, that very platform for action flagged 12 key areas where urgent action were mostly needed to ensure gender equality and opportunities for women, men, boys, and girls. It also laid out concrete ways for countries to bring about change. And to date, these things are still talked about, but there has been no real effective change. And we should ask ourselves why. And this question, why, is why we are here today, to talk about why we need more representation, especially so at the National Assembly, where laws are made to affect you and I. I would like to say, without reservations, that one of the major reasons Africa lags behind developmentally compared to other continents is because the women and the youth have not been given their rightful places in governance. Thus, targeting women, the youth, and the physically challenged at this critical time in our political space is just the strategic thing to do. This aims at including everyone in advancing our continent. It resonates to the fact that when women are given a chance in anything whatsoever, they excel, and they excel effortlessly because it comes from the heart. It comes from within. And I will leave you with two quotes. One by William Jennings Bryan, an American orator and politician from Illinois and Nebraska, who emerged as a dominant force in the Democratic Party, notwithstanding that he unsuccessfully contested for the presidency of America 3 times. I mean unsuccessful, but that still made him a very eminent person because he never gave up. And I quote from him, "Destiny is no matter of chance. It is a matter of choice. It is not a thing to be waited for. It is a thing to be achieved," unquote. And I believe together with our partners, the men, working side by side with us, we can achieve what we are looking for today. The second quote is by Ronald Reagan, and I quote, "The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave," unquote. And who are the brave? It is you and I, the women and the youth of this world. And I leave you with these two quotes whilst we discuss this draft, and I hope it is validated positively. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. I will now call on Janet Sala Njai, our able consultant, to give the opening ceremony.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson of this August gathering and President of the CSO Gender Platform, honorable members of the National Assembly here present, of course, recognizing also the presence of Honorable Tumanjai, who's at the high table with us today, the representative of the ministry responsible for gender. I don't have the full name, but the ministry is responsible for gender matters anyway. Women leaders here present, honorable gentlemen here present, because a woman leader does not always have to be a woman. So when I say women leaders here present, I include everyone, including the gentlemen in our midst. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm indeed honored to be associated with this laudable initiative to put in place an appropriate mechanism through legislation to accelerate genuine de facto equality between men and women in the political arena of the Gambia, especially with regard to representation at the level of the National Assembly. I reiterate, genuine de facto, because the laws themselves do not discriminate. But we're talking about genuine de facto, accelerating genuine de facto equality. The chairperson mentioned the government of the Gambia as the duty bearers, that they have a responsibility in terms of fulfilling the international obligations of the Gambia. In that respect, I would like to highlight that the government of the Gambia in the National Development Plan 2018-2020 committed to delivering good governance and accountability, social cohesion, and national reconciliation, and a revitalized and transformed economy for the well-being of all Gambians, and I underscore all Gambians, men and women included. In recognition of the fact that gender equality and women's empowerment are still major challenges in the Gambian society, the NDP also seeks to empower Gambian women to achieve their full potential as a key driver of the plan, in line with the strategic objectives of the national gender policy of the Gambia. That is, at the time, the 2010-2020 gender policy. The commitments enshrined in the NDP and the gender policy are in consonance with the international obligations of the Gambia, as enshrined in the International Bill of Rights for Women, namely the CEDAW and the Maputo Protocol. These two global and regional instruments were ratified by the government of the Gambia on the 16th of April 1993 and the 16th of April and the 16th of April 2005, respectively. This is a long time ago. I think Honorable Tuma talked about the decade, but we're talking about our commitment as a nation and the time that we ratified these instruments and the fact that it was as of those dates that we had an obligation to do the needful to ensure that what we're doing today ought to have been done a long time ago. The protocol in particular provides comprehensive provisions on the elimination of discrimination against women in Africa, in many cases breaking boundaries in areas where CEDAW failed to introduce additional provision. Furthermore, in 2004, the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa was adopted by the African heads of states and government to accelerate the implementation of the Maputo Protocol in areas such as women's health, gender-based violence, gender parity at national and local level. This was a commitment made for gender parity and women's land and property rights. These regional and global instruments have profoundly influenced the legal landscape in the Gambia. The commitments of CEDAW, the protocol, and SDGE have been significantly incorporated into the national legal framework in the Gambia through the 1997 Constitution, the Women's Act 2010 as amended in 2015, the Domestic Violence Act 2013, and the Sexual Offences Act 2013. The obligations incorporated into the national legal framework include, to a limited extent, and I repeat, to a limited extent, women's right to participate in the public and political affairs in the Gambia, and to be represented at all levels of decision-making. In particular, sections 26 of the Constitution and 28 guarantee political rights of all persons on a non-discriminatory basis. And section 28 further provides that women have the right to equal treatment with men, including equal opportunities in political, economic, and social activities. So de jure, as we say in law, legally, the Constitution guarantees women equal rights with women. However, even though these provisions are aligned with the commitments in CEDAW and the Maputo Protocol in ensuring women's full participation in public and decision-making at all levels, they fall short of the full compliance with the Articles 4 and 7 of CEDAW and Article 9 of the Maputo Protocol. These articles effectively impose an obligation on the government of the Gambia to put in place temporary special measures through legislation and other measures as a means of addressing historical imbalances between men and women across all sectors. These are historical, cultural imbalances that inhibit the participation of women, despite what is guaranteed in the Constitution. Furthermore, even though the Gambia was the first country in Africa, this is very commendable, the Gambia was the first country in Africa to incorporate and domesticate both the CEDAW and the Maputo Protocol through the enactment of the Women's Act, the Act also did not go far enough in filling this gap in the national legal framework in the Gambia. There is a section 15 of the Act that attempted to domesticate the provisions of CEDAW by imposing an obligation on every organ of government, public body and institution, and even private enterprises to adopt temporary special measures as set out in the Act. But if you look at the Act closely, you'll find that it mentions temporary special measures set out in the Act. But those measures are not stipulated. So we don't know what the temporary special measures are. So one cannot rely on that to ensure that we have the right representation. So the provisions have no specific provisions setting out the special measures to be adopted to ensure that women attain genuine de facto equality through special reservation of seats, or a quota system at all levels of decision-making, including National Assembly. I must say that this was a missed opportunity for the full realization of the relevant provision of the CEDAW and the protocol, vis-a-vis the acceleration of genuine de facto equality for women at all levels of decision-making processes, including National Assembly. It is therefore apparent that despite the significant strides and changes in the social equality policies and laws, women remain underrepresented at all levels of decision-making in the Gambia, and this is particularly evident in the political sphere. As highlighted by Anti-Taboo, women constitute only 17.9%, 17.39% at the level of cabinet. Out of 23 cabinet positions, we have only 4 women, and 10.2% level at the National Assembly. Out of 58 National Assembly members, we have only 6. This underrepresentation is due to the cultural biases that favor men and inhibit women's participation in the political arena. I must also record that it is commendable that the Vice President of the Republic, the Speaker of the National Assembly, and 2 of the judges at the apex court in the Gambia, the Supreme Court, these are the 3 arms of government, are women. We have 2 Supreme Court judges, the Speaker of the National Assembly, and the Vice President. These women leaders should be role models and mentors for other women, and their presence should also have a positive impact on gender equality. However, experience has shown that simply adding few women in key senior positions is insufficient to address inequalities and to positively impact change if the biases in the socio-cultural context deeply entrenched in patriarchy are not tackled. Whereas these women leaders may be role models and mentors, the threat is that unless and until we have a critical mass at the highest level of decision-making, the queen bee syndrome may creep into the fora. And I repeat, the queen bee syndrome, just having a few people, few queen bees sitting there and claiming to represent everybody. Having a few women at the top in a male-dominated society may have little or no impact in the struggle for the attainment of equality and equity. Queen bees themselves operate in a very hostile male-dominated environment, may also begin to apply gender stereotypes they themselves have encountered, or start exhibiting toxic masculine mannerism as a survival and coping mechanism. This is particularly apparent in the political landscape, where women who attempt to contest election on an equal footing with men, as contemplated in the 1997 Constitution, are subjected to all forms of harassment, intimidation, and discrimination. Thus, this current initiative to remedy this imbalance, through the formulation of a legislative proposal to put in place a mechanism for reservation of specific seats for women at the level of the National Assembly, is not only in consonance with our international obligation, but will also offer a solution to ensuring that the necessary critical mass is attained at the level of the National Assembly to ensure that women are able to take part and have a positive influence in the process of enactment of the necessary laws that will transform society for the well-being of all Gambians. It is only through this critical mass that women can effectively influence this needed change. The draft Constitutional Amendment Bill, the Constitution of the Republic of Gambia, is therefore being presented for review and validation, and is based on a very thorough and comprehensive review of the existing legal framework in the Gambia. The review entails a very participatory process with the active participation of a review committee constituted by relevant stakeholders, namely a National Assembly member and the president of the CSO Gender Platform, together with the funders of this initiative. The draft has been subjected to intense scrutiny by the review committee to ensure ownership and incorporation of the necessary technical input. The draft is indeed not final. And as we carry out the exercise of further reviewing and validating the draft bill, we must all take cognizance of the growing challenges that women continue to be confronted with in our society, and the relevance of ensuring that women should take part in the decision-making process in addressing such challenges. The chairperson has actually tasked us at the beginning to observe a minute's silence in memory of a dear departed young soul. There are so many that we don't know about, and unless we actually rise up to the challenge and make sure that we are at the decision-making table, it will be difficult to address these challenges. As the adage goes, one cannot decide for women without women. Women must take their seats and be part of the decision-making process at all levels. It is indeed commendable that the draft bill is the joint initiative of the Women's Rights Platform and a member of the National Assembly, and it is proposed to be tabled as a private member's bill. This reinforces its legitimacy and further confirms that its contents are relevant to the welfare and well-being of women at large and the nation. It is my hope that this validation process will further enhance the final draft, that it will eventually be introduced into the National Assembly as a non-partisan, on a non-partisan basis. And I reinforce that, on a non-partisan basis. And that it will gain the support of all well-meaning persons interested in the best interests of the women of the Gambia. So this is not partisan, okay? I would like to express my heartfelt appreciation to the sponsors. At least that has been recorded by Antitabu and Honorable Tuma, for the opportunity to contribute to this very important national assignment as a consultant, and for the trust and confidence reposed in me. I also wish to take this opportunity to commend the review committee for their active participation and contribution throughout the process. I would also like to take this opportunity to commend two very passionate and indefatigable women, that is Honorable Fatou Njai and Mrs. Tabu Sarr, for championing this laudable initiative. At this juncture, I thank you all for your kind attention, and I look forward to fruitful deliberation.
Thank you very much, our EU consultant, for the detailed analysis of women's underrepresentation and the evidence that you gave imparted, and the need for this women's bill to go through so that women can have, women can be able to be represented in key decision-making positions, especially the National Assembly, in which major and key decisions that affect our lives are made. And thank you very much for the energy that you put into this document and the knowledge. And I can attest here that it was a very participatory process, because she reached out to all of us to ensure that what we want is actually in the document, and being very patient as well Because when you deal with women, you really need patience. Because at one point in time, the Honorable was out of town, but she too had to join from where she was, and we keep discussing. So thank you very much, lead consultant, and I hope that we all live to see this bill and celebrate it when it is passed at the National Assembly. At this juncture, I will call on Ms. Lala Jaite, the representative from the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Welfare, to give a statement on behalf of the Minister of that ministry.
Representative of the International Republican Institute, members of the Gender Platform, women leaders here present, gentlemen. On behalf of the Minister, I wish to register our sincere appreciation and honor to be associated with such an activity. I can assure this August gathering that it is in line with the policies and programs set out by the government. The Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Welfare is the custodian of all affairs related to the emancipation of women and children as far as the government is concerned, and as such, the Constitutional Women's Amendment Bill is highly welcome. I join previous speakers in thanking everyone who have in one way or the other contributed to the development of this bill, which is not only important, but timely. Ladies and gentlemen, it remains a far cry since independence for women to be seen participating in the political arena. We're only seen as mobilizers, dancers, cookers, but taking the role in leadership in both politics and in the National Assembly, in particular, will need to be supported by development-oriented individuals, and the ministry is no exception. You can count on us throughout this noble process. The ministry gives maximum support and urges for every stakeholder to be fully informed of this bill. Ladies and gentlemen, research has shown that when women are in positions of authority, they tend to resolve national crises without resorting to violence, advocate for social issues that benefit all, and allocate budgets to health and education. Women bring in ideas and actions, suggestions and solutions to end and address gender-based violence in our society. Paving the way for more women in the political, business, and civic arena is an investment which is more than just, equitable, and peaceful societies. Honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, girls and women have the right to engage in civil society, to vote in elections, be elected in government offices, serve on boards, make their voices heard in any process that will ultimately affect them, their families, and their community. Investing in girls and women's right in political participation is a necessary step in achieving global gender equality and democratic governance. Furthermore, investing in girls and women creates a ripple effect that yields more multiple benefits, not only for the individual women, but also for families, communities, and countries. And increasing women's participation in politics leads to greater investments in all sectors. Attaining gender balance in the political sphere promotes gender balance in the workforce, which can contribute to GDP growth, and not only development, but sustainable development. In the Gambia, according to the mixed report, 46.5% married before 18, 8.6% married before the age of 15, 42.4% of girls between the ages of 0 and 14 years are victims of FGMC. The prevalence of FGMC is 76.3%. Some of the greatest challenges to the attainment of fundamental rights and freedoms of women are deeply rooted in foundations of traditions. The ministry stands in solidarity with the CSOs as partners in development and congratulate the Gender Platform for such an initiative and all those who have supported this process as women and girls continue to face many challenges to fulfill their dreams and lead. The factors that contribute to this, among others, include inadequate women in leadership positions, where major decisions are made in form of policies, programs, budget allocation in social, economic, and politics. If women are not taken care of, development will be slow. I have no doubt that this bill will be voted to enable women's proportional representation in the National Assembly and political party institutions. On behalf of the ministry, once again, we are proud to announce that we renew our commitment to fight against injustice and empower women, girls, and young women and educate our boys and the men. On this note, I declare this workshop open and thank you all for your attention. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Lala Jaite, for those remarks. And I think we should all be rest assured that we are in the right direction by virtue of the fact that the ministry has supported this idea, as well as the National Assembly members here present. Also, I would like to recognize the presence of Ms. Bafu Jeng from the Ministry of Justice and the representative of the UNFPA who jointly supported this process, and also the lady representing the mayoress of Banjul. On this note, according to the program, we will go for a group photo and a tea break, and come back, reconvene here for allow the consultant to go through the document with us, and then call on contributions from the beautiful women in this room, and our men, and our handsome men who are here for she's. And members, I would also like to recognize members of the Gender Platform. On that note, thank you very much.
bi nga xam ne moom moo njëkk a yëkkati kàddu gërëm nañ jigéen ñi ñëpp ci teewaay biñ teew, ndax tey samedi ku nekk xam nga ne bés bu xat la ci jigéen, waaye jigéen ñi bàyyi seen soxla yi yëpp ñëw uyu si. mu ne nga oote ñu uyu si la rek du ngóora, dafa wone rek ne ñi nga oo li ñu tax a toog fii nii tey itteel na leen moo tax ñëpp ñëw moom mi nga xam ne mooy Tabara Tabu Njaay Sarr gërëm na ñëpp sant na ñëpp tey wax ne li nga xam ne moo ñu fi dajale muy bil bi nga xam ne dañ koy jàngat ku am loo ci yokk nga yokk si ku am loo ci wàññi nga wàññi si ñu oo nag ñi nga xam ne ñoom la soxal pour ñu ñëw jàngat lii nga xam ne mooy yokk jigéen ñi ci National Assembly li nga xam ne moom la wax na ni ku nekk xam na ni National Assembly bi ëpp na 4 fukka waaye liñ ci am ci jigéen néew na yàgg nañu wax ne dañuy dooleel jigéen waaye dooleel jigéen wax ja bari woon na lool waaye jëf ja néew moo tax nag ñoom bi nga xam ne ci lañ taxaw ci loolu ñu ne dinañ taxaw seen kéemtalaay kattan pour gis ne ak yelleefu jigéen ak ñi ci des dinañ gis ne ku ci nekk li nga war a moom rek dinañ la ko jox li nga xam ne moo soxal jigéen ñi muy sexual and gender based violence yooyu yëpp nga xam ne yàgg nañ di ko jàmbat waaye ba tey mënuñu cee am saafara soo gisee nag loolu yëpp am ci gàttal rek mu ngi laa won ne jigéen ñi fi nga xam ne seeni mbir dañ ko fay waxtaanee jigéen ñi duñ fay nekk benn ci National Assembly ci néegi député yi kon bill bii nii dina yokk taxawaayu jigéen ñi ci National Assembly bi pour gàttal rek bi nga xam ne mu ngi doon wax tamit wax na ne mu jël benn minute ñu ñaanal Marie Mende di xale bu ndaw boobu nga xam ne dañ àgg ci kawam sàkk ko ba pare rey ko muy lu xam ne lu métti la ñu ñaanal ko fam dem dinal ko fi mu xam ne foofu la jógee biñ jógee ci loolu ñu ngi ñëw ci yeneen kilifa ku mel ni Ajaratu Tuma Njaay Fatoumata Njaay di député Banjul South moom tamit waxtaan na ci ne moom loolu yàgg naa nekk itteem pour ñu gis ne jigéen ñi seen taxawaay si fi ñoo waxtaanee seeni mbir jigéen dafa war a teew mu ne loolu géntam la woon te sant na yàlla bi nga xam ne gént googu noonu yàllaa ngay def mu ngay bëgg a sotti mu ne bu si yàlla àndee april bi ñëw liñ ci war a def yëpp suñ ko ci defee april bi ñëw bil bi nga xam ne mooy yokkateewaay jigéen ñi ci néegi député yi bu soobee yàlla dina antu mu ne mu ngi yëgal ñëpp ne pour émale góor ak jigéen la fa nekk loo xam ne lu am solo la mu ne waaye ñu ngi ci doon waxtaan waaye waruta am foofu war nañoo def leneen ak leneen mu ne jigéen nit war naa teew foo xam ne ay mbiram fa lañ koy waxtaanee maanaam boo seetloo rek li nga xam ne loolu la Tabara wax ak li Ajaratu Tuma Njaay wax di député Banjul South man mii fa ma jógee lépp benn la joytu bi benn la wax ci benn la mooy ne lii yàggoon yàgg waroon a am la waaye mu ne moom tamit am na yaakaari député yi suñu càmmiñ ñi suñu jëkkër ñi nga xam ne li olof naan feccum liir bu neexee yaay jaatiyee ca mbagg ya mu ne góor ñi itam ñu ngi leen a ñaan ngeen taxawuñu ndax mënuñoo dem te yéen bokku leen ci seen taxawaay am na solo bu ngeen demee ca néegi député yi suñu yóbbu bil bi tamit am nañ yaakaar ci yéen ne di ngeen ñu taxawu ki nga xam ne mooy Ajaratu Janet Salla Njaay mi nga xam ne moom mooy ndey mbile gi moom lañ joxoon liggéey bu rëy bii mu liggéey ko moom tamit waxtaan na ci li nga xam ne mooy doole jigéen am na luwaay yu bari yoo xam ne mu ne nguur gaa ngi ko taxawal am na yépp duñ ko fi mun a wax waaye maanaam li Ajaratu Janet Salla wax mooy jigéen war naa teew fépp foo xam ne rek fa la ñoo càmbaree ay mbiram maanaam soo seetloo ci gàttal ñi fiy wax yépp wax ji benn la wane ne jigéen ñi am na place yu am solo yoo xam ne jigéen dañ fa war a nekkat ñoom ñëpp wane nañ ne jigéen ak xolam ak yéeneem ak yërmandem ci liggéey ak yitte bi muy def ci liggéey am na solo ba nga xam ne buñ jëlee yenn place yi teg leen ci seen loxo am nañ yaakaar ne dinañ wone lu raw suñu naataango yi lañ wone woon moom tamit gërëm na ñaari jigéen ñoo xam ne muy Ajaratu Tuma Njaay ak Ajaratu Tabara Njaay Sarr ndax ñoom itam ba moo liggéey bi jàppale woon nañ ko Ajaratu Tabara am na seede bu mu joxe woon sax si Janet Salla Njaay mu ne dafa dal mu ne am na liggéey yu mel nii soo koy liggéey mu ne dangay ànd ak dal mu ne te Janet Salla Njaay nekk na nit ku dal koo xam ne ba moo liggéey bi ànd nag dal ànd nag sagoom te liggéey na liggéey bu rafet léegi kay li si des mooy li nga xam ne moom lañ ko santoon mu def ko ñu indi ko ñu waxtaan ci ñu seet luñ ciy yokk ak luñ ciy wàññi ñu seet su fekkee ne loolu itteel na ñëpp ñu yóbbu ko su ko defee liñ ci war a def ñu def ko ci ki nga xam ne mooy Ajaratu Lala Jaiteh di Deputy Permanent Secretary Ministry of Gender Children and Social Welfare nga xam ne moo fi toogal ministre jigéen ñi sax laay mën a wax muy Fatou Kinte moom moo fi teewaloon ministre boobu noonu nga xam ne moom lañ jox place bu mag boobu moom it waxtaan na balaa moo ubbi jotaay bi mu ne ñoom ñu ngi leen a support 100% mu ne ñoom ñu ngi ci seen gannaaw mu ne bill bi dinañ ko welcome mu ne gërëm na ñépp ñoo xam ne seen loxo ngi ci woon ci biir mu ne dinañ ko support ci dinañ ko dooleel ci kàttanu yàlla mu ne jigéen ñi nga xam ne dañ war a nekk ci place yu kawe yi mu ne loolu daf leen itteel wax na li nga xam ne mooy jongal jigéen nga xam ne ministre bi ba tey itteel na ko ak yeneen yoo xam ne bokkul ak yelleefu jigéen kon ñoom ministre bi mu ne ñu ngi nekk ci solidarité maanaam loxo ak loxo ak gender plateforme bi pour li nga xam ne moom lañ bëgg a def nii doole jigéen yokk taxawaay jigéen ci néegi député yi mu am solo mu ne bill bi incha allah am na yaakaar ne bill bi dinañ ko dooleel balaa may tëj ci kàttanu yàlla ma ni tamit ma di leen yëgal ne di rafet di Gambia National Chapter bi nga xam ne Mbaye Rohey Malick Lowe moo ko jiite rafet am na taxawaay bu mel nii boo xam ne daf ko doon taxaw waaye rafet bi mu gisee ne gender plateforme bi taxaw na ñu bokk lu ñoo taxaw mayor bi ci kàddoom wax na ne moom rafet la dina bàyyi lépp lu mu doon def ñu topp ci gannaaw gender plateforme bi topp ci gannaaw ñi nga xam ne ñooy liggéey li di dooleel jigéen ndax moom Rohey Malick Lowe nee na dooleel jigéen rek moo ko amal solo balaa may tëj may gërëm suma mbokk yi am di jàmm yi jigéen ñi ak suñuy càmmiñ di leen gërëm di leen sant di leen wax asalaamaaleykum wa rahmatullah.
Asalaamaaleykum wa rahmatullahi taala wa barakatuh. Ngamoɓe konton ganna programme chairperson konton Antitabu Sara nga konton honorable Fatou Ndiaye nga fana konton National Assembly member Banjul South nata nga Lala Joyte fana konton Ministry of Women, Children and Social Welfare ganna musujato konton Ndiaye ka fa Mbaye Rohey Malick Lowe sampulo lo nyontan lo nga fana konton akuma yata bak nga Gambia musol konton albebe siri ngal konton bi allo dula be ñaari mbakel ni wo botaje nga nana programme kon from the discussion on Antitabu Sara min fojang wolo muko na maral kitabo ka fami yo constitution ka jube falindirol min be keleje wala lafarol min nyanta keleje ka tum be ajal ko parliament yimbe ka musol sembentuya musol bita nyato nyaadi musol satara politiko to nyaadi ni kuobe ka musol fasa akuma yata bakele andu ya tandi jam fana ko ni dada na National Assembly mbe ngajele musol do yata je bakele parce que ni ajan to ko musole na pour fongol la kango nselo no fay kan fongol la kango na musia fasa kalo musia kan tol fongol la kadiamu fongol la kola wala kuma yata bake wala yaje ko muso manyana tura koma National Assembly kaje ko musole siaje at least hanatara 60% ni sa sotono musole taraje akuma yata bake ni wo botaje fana akumo dol mole mi yalon ko kaje ko musol fana amanko woti gender based violence ngaje ko la musol fana mantora kan asiata bake so musol la mantora kuol be ntol nyantal kawol kuol kele kan kuol kele because mbe ya jole ko constitution musol la kon maral kitabo akumayata ndaka fana fon during their presentation amanya na dana dolonko National Assembly amina la fontol councilor mi yalon ko grassroots aka commencé wolto isaje se musol hani ndino pour nga dunno politiko kon nga hani politiko la kadum be yalon no politiko manka ku sono yarent ako kuliano dolmal isetara no politiko la te banim position na te buka moji mobile kanyori koma woko woto wokuwa ka manyana tula koma kabinta lafta lola no area council Antitabu Sara nga yaay sifake ke wato meyol fo man tomo kaje ko di meyol soto to doro muso e ke deputy Antitabu Sara ka anti amisise gender activist so woto alodula kumaya tabakel kabiri nu kaje ko muso la nyanto e dila ya fofo na partition alngan hakilo to wolo non partition wato an ko lo fo muso e muso setara no any political party bari nga muso ya fasa ngam fanje ko Gambia muso la munti ngam fanje ko mu Gambia muso manjere ni kelo mo kanam fayndi nyoka ndol fa wala kam fayndi nyoka alin kana so wala alin nga nyomuta bakili fakili ñi ku moy be foto de dron kam siya fasalam kam sol sembentuya kaje ni tata national assembly kam mo sit soto musolla wala local government councils akumayata bakel ndeba mo dan la min ya min fote mbe gender platform wal fanan kontona musol bi jana salama njay mba fanan kontona la lodu wa beti atabak wane wato wat kalom sole ka joko musol wato wati sen ka funyoka iben karandi la bar karandi ro ko la muneke keno sa fele benta jambi kumol fota woto ndebe min folo rek alnga musia fasa nga joko politiko ni fele ni bota president mbita national assembly nga mo sisto ko mi jili afo nyame kadun tolu 114 councillors ngama only 7 were elected yalo o mam nyiya wala tinna nata jambi ka kacha politiko la na nyi maro kitabo le nga amen wolon ka falendirol kala ni la farol mi nyanta keleje kam sol sembentuya kam siya fasa ntel ni kewol 50-50 te kelano one ko men and women must be partners in the process of peacemaking, peace building. Itatula no koma. Because without it itano nta woto anga ifanante tu ngeja idoro yempus ngata ntal tula no koma side by side. Wokungola kachata ja woto ngalbe tentu ngalje woto ala baraka wa.
Look at the slide in front of you. It says validation workshop, the draft constitution of the Republic of the Gambia Amendment Bill 2021, presented by Janet Arsala Njai. But I'll be remiss if I don't acknowledge the fact that this was a joint endeavor and a joint initiative. And in the spirit of empowerment and ensuring that we bring along the young ones, both male and female, I work very closely with two very erudite and prominent young lawyers who were just called to the bar recently, in the persons of Zisukai Bangura here, and Mr. Abdullah Drame, a male but very sensitive male. So in the spirit of passing on the rope and leaving the ladder for other people to climb, because we talked about the queen bee syndrome. We don't want to be queen bees. Let's make sure that the young people also come on board. So the presentation today will be done by Sukai, and I will support her. Sukai will do the presentation of the bill. So I think we should just give her a round of applause. Yes. So without much ado, I'll introduce Sukai. Sukai will be supported by Abdullah, and I'll chip in as and when the need arises. Thank you.
Good afternoon to you all dignitaries present here today, all protocols respectfully observed. My colleague and I, as Mrs. Janet Salanjai mentioned, had the privilege of working with her on this project. And today I will be taking you through the process that led to this validation exercise and the consultations, the analysis, and the recommendations adopted to formulate a bill, amending the Constitution and providing for reservation of seats for women at the National Assembly. On the next slide is a brief outline of today's presentation. We would first look at the background to the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia Amendment Bill 2021. Then we would discuss the objects and reasons for the bill. Why the need for reservation? After that, we would move to discussing what the provisions are to implement reservation. What are these provisions that are necessary to implement reservation of seats for women? We would look at what is contained in the bill, along with the explanatory memorandum, and then finally, the bill itself. We were tasked to review the 1997 Constitution, the 2020 draft, and other relevant legislation to identify key barriers to women's political participation and make recommendations on sections to be amended. The ultimate aim was to draft a bill for the reservation of seats for women in the National Assembly in line with the proposals in the 2020 draft Constitution. A review committee was set up for this purpose, and it comprised of a National Assembly member, a well-respected member of civil society, and the consultant. As mentioned by Mrs. Njai in her address, a very participatory approach was adopted with the active participation of the review committee to confirm all deliverables of the assignment. A comprehensive desk review was prepared with analysis of international obligations, the 1997 Constitution, the Women's Act of 2010, and the Elections Act of 1996. However, we would first consider the Gambia's international obligations on matters concerning this assignment. Under the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, in short, CEDAW, to which the Gambia is a state party, Article 4 and 7, as shown above, have effectively committed the Gambia to the realization of the objectives of this assignment through the adoption of special measures and affirmative action to ensure women's genuine de facto participation in the political life of the Gambia. Article 4 reads, and I quote, "Adoption by state parties of temporary special measures aimed at accelerating de facto equality between men and women shall not be considered discrimination as defined in the present convention, but shall in no way entail as a consequence the maintenance of unequal or separate standards. These measures shall be discontinued when the objectives of equality of opportunity and treatment have been achieved." In addition, Article 7 provides, and I read, "Eliminate discrimination against women in the political and public life of the country, and in particular, ensure women are on equal terms with men in the formulation of government policy and to hold public office and perform public functions at all levels of government." The commitments made in the CEDAW calls upon the Gambia as a state party to enact specific legislation to ensure that women are accorded special consideration in the allocation of seats and the demarcation of constituency boundaries for election to the National Assembly. In addition to the CEDAW, the Gambia being a state party to the Maputo Protocol, to the next slide. Okay. To the Maputo Protocol, which is the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa, has also committed under Article 9 to adopt affirmative action and other relevant measures through enabling legislation to ensure that women are equally represented at all electoral processes. Article 9 reads, and I quote, "To take action to promote participative governance and the equal participation of women in the political life of their countries through affirmative action, enabling national legislation and other measures to ensure that women participate without any discrimination in all elections and are represented equally at all levels with men in all electoral processes." Articles 4 and 7 of the CEDAW and Article 9 of the Maputo Protocol, therefore, set the ground for state parties, including the Gambia, to take measures to ensure that women enjoy de facto equality on an equal basis with men. The analysis of the Gambia's international obligations led us to review the national legal framework. The first point of call is the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. And the sections which concern the guarantee of the political rights of women are sections 26 and 28. But first, let's have a look at the provisions of section 26 dealing with political rights. Section 26 reads, "Every citizen of the Gambia of full age and capacity shall have the right, without unreasonable restrictions, to take part in the conduct of public affairs directly or through freely chosen representatives, to vote and stand for elections at genuine periodic elections for public office, which elections shall be by universal and equal suffrage and be held by secret ballot, to have access on general terms of equality to public service in the Gambia." The guarantees of Section 26, however, do not reflect the realities on the ground. As Mrs. Njai stated in her statement, at the National Assembly, for example, women make up only 10.3% of the total number of parliamentarians. Compared to their male counterparts, women are overwhelmingly underrepresented at the National Assembly. In addition to Section 26, Section 28, which deals with the rights of women, states that women shall be accorded full and equal dignity of the person with men. Women shall have the right to equal treatment with men, including equal opportunities in political, economic, and social activities. While Section 28 guarantees women equality, it falls short of fulfilling the international commitments enshrined in the CEDAW and Maputo Protocol in ensuring de facto equality. Section 28 does not take into consideration the socio-cultural context within which we find ourselves, which is deeply rooted in the culture of patriarchy. In addition to Sections 26 and 28, Sections 214, subsection 4, which falls under the directive principles of state policy, provides that in the composition of government, women shall be fairly represented. However, this principle is limited to representation in government, meaning the executive, and does not extend to the legislature. In addition, directive principles of state policy do not confer any legal rights and are not enforceable before the courts. We can only hope that any legislation ensuring reservation of seats may rely upon the principle of fair representation, hoping that the courts would interpret it fairly and hold it to be constitutional. The conclusion, therefore, is that the Constitution of the Gambia does not have any specific or enabling provision to guarantee reserved seats for women in the National Assembly. After the analysis of the Constitution, we proceeded to analyze the Women's Act. The long title to the Women's Act expressly defines the scope of the Act to include domestication of the CEDAW and the Maputo Protocol without any qualifications. It was therefore the perfect opportunity to incorporate the relevant provisions of CEDAW and the Protocol relating to the adoption of special measures and affirmative action to accelerate the political participation and representation of women at the National Assembly. In this respect, the Act in Section 15 provides for temporal special measures. It provides that every organ, body, public institution, authority, or private enterprise shall adopt temporary special measures as set out in this Act aimed at accelerating de facto equality between men and women. Mrs. Njai did mention this in her statement, and as she said, it was a missed opportunity, as the National Assembly at the time of passing the bill did not go far enough to set out the special measures to be adopted, whether through a quota system or reservation mechanism. As a result, there is no mandatory provision in the Act that accords special reservation or quota for women with regards to representation at the National Assembly. Unfortunately, Section 15 is the only provision that sought to fulfill the obligations in the CEDAW, like I mentioned, but unfortunately, this did not materialize. So in addition to the Constitution and the Women's Act, the review also considered an analysis of the Elections Act. Section 4 of the Elections Act, Section 4, subsection 2, paragraph A, which deals with administrative areas, constituencies, and wards, mirrors the provision of Section 88 of the Constitution, which prescribes the number of constituencies. Section 4 provides, and I quote, "For the purpose of the election of members of the National Assembly, the Gambia shall be divided into constituencies demarcated in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and any other law, with each constituency returning one member." The section, therefore, merely complies with the constitutional provision, but does not provide for the reservation of any of the constituencies for women. Again, an opportunity to reserve specific seats for women from among the 53 seats was missed. Because of these gaps cited in the current national legal framework, the review considered the provisions of the 2020 draft constitution that sought to remedy the deficiencies in the law regarding reservation. The sections relevant for this purpose are sections 84, 136, and Schedule 3. Section 84, to begin with, imposes an obligation on political parties to promote gender equality in selecting candidates for election, including the selection of women to contest for election. In addition to Section 84, the draft constitution goes further to provide a legal framework for the reservation of specific seats for women in the National Assembly under Sections 136 and Schedule 3. The draft constitution effectively increased the composition of the National Assembly by adding 14 more seats for women and 2 more seats for persons with disabilities, in addition to the already existing seats based on the single-member constituencies. So in addition to the 53 seats, the draft constitution was proposing 14 additional seats specifically for women and 2 seats for persons with disabilities. These innovative proposals, which had received overwhelming support and acceptance throughout the consultative process that informed and formed the basis of the provisions in the draft, would have ushered a new era in the Gambia with respect to women's political participation and representation at the National Assembly. At the conclusion of the review, it was observed that despite the express provisions in the 1997 Constitution, the Women's Act of 2010 and other relevant legislations, that the Gambia is yet to realize the fulfillment of its international obligations for adoption of special temporal measures to accelerate genuine de facto equality and representation of women at the level of the National Assembly. The cultural bias in favor of men and the perception about the role of women in society does not put women on an equal footing with men to participate in the political arena. Thus, the need to provide special measures to accelerate and increase the participation of women at the National Assembly. The proposals identified, highlighted in the 2020 draft constitution, sought to remedy this gap with the adoption of mechanisms to ensure that women were given the power to effectively participate in political process in the Gambia in line with the country's international obligations. Thus, the proposal for the reservation of specific seats for women in prescribing the composition to the National Assembly and a mandatory obligation imposed on political parties to ensure genuine de facto equality in selecting candidates to contest elections for the National Assembly. I would now take you through the review. At the conclusion of the review, the analysis were made, as highlighted, and proposals were also made on recommendations which we would deliberate on individually. The recommendations made, as indicated in the slide, were to consider the introduction of a bill to amend the Constitution, or the introduction of a bill to amend Section 15 of the Women's Act 2010 by expressly setting out the special measures in the Act for accelerating genuine de facto equality between men and women, the introduction of a bill to amend Sections 4, subsections 2, paragraph A, and 104 of the Elections Act, or the introduction of a standalone legislation dealing with reservation of seats. The first recommendation was the introduction of a bill to amend the Constitution. This would ensure that all the proposals in 2020 draft would be provided for with very limited modification. However, for this to happen, the bill has to be published in at least 2 issues of the Gazette, with the latest publication being not less than 3 months after the first. Then it would be introduced into the National Assembly not earlier than 10 days after the latest publication, and then it would have to be supported by the votes of not less than 3/4 of all the members of the National Assembly after the second and third readings. These are the provisions contained under Section 226 that would require for the amendment of the Constitution to take place. The second recommendation was the introduction of a bill to amend Section 15 of the Women's Act by expressly setting out the special measures in the Act for accelerating genuine de facto equality between men and women. This would include the stipulation of specific quota or reservation of specific number of seats for women out of the 53 member constituencies demarcated by the IEC. However, the challenge with this is it may be confronted by resistance because the reserved seats would have to come from the already existing 53 seats as provided for under Section 88. The male members of the National Assembly, therefore, may be reluctant to support the bill due to the threat of losing their seats to female counterparts. Additionally, we should also avert our minds to the fact that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land and prevails over the Women's Act. So any such proposed reservation must be in line with the Constitution. For this reason, the third recommendation was the introduction of a bill to amend Sections 4, subsection 2, paragraph A, and 104 of the Election Act. Sections 104 of the Election Act provides for the registration and conduct of political parties. The recommendation, therefore, was to impose an obligation on the Independent Electoral Commission to reserve 1 or 2 single-member constituencies in each administrative area for women only. The second recommendation was to impose an obligation on political parties to promote gender equity in selecting candidates for election, including the selection of women to contest for election. However, as with the Women's Act, this will also be constrained by the provisions of Section 88. And in addition, may also be faced with resistance because these reserve seats would still be from among the 53 seats that we have. The final recommendation, therefore, was the introduction of a standalone legislation dealing with reservation of seats. This was envisaged in the terms of, this was what was envisaged in the terms of reference of the consultant. This is what was preferred. However, the advantage would have been that it would specifically address the issue of reservation entirely. But the major hurdle with this is that the bill will be null and void from the onset because it would conflict with the provisions of the Constitution. So for each of the proposals that we made, there was a conflict that we could find with the Constitution because, like I said, it remains the supreme law of the land, and any law which is inconsistent with it is void. And therefore, if a standalone legislation was being proposed, it would not go through because of this constraint. Additionally, the Women's Act already makes provisions and is the legal framework for the domestication of the CEDAW and the Maputo Protocol. And therefore, a separate legislation for reservation of seats will lead to a fragmentation of the law. With these considerations in mind, the review committee deliberated extensively, taking into consideration all the analysis that we have presented before you, and adopted the recommendation to introduce a bill to amend the Constitution. This is what we're here to validate today. The provisions relevant to reservation on the 2020 draft Constitution, therefore, were adopted as proposed. As explained earlier, Section 84 deals with political parties. Section 84 of the draft Constitution imposes that obligation on the political parties to ensure equality between men and women. Sections 136 established the composition of the National Assembly, making reservations on, at Schedule 3. The bill that is being proposed, therefore, incorporates wholesale the provisions of sections 84, subsections 2, paragraph F and H, and 136, subsection 2, with the proposed amendments of section 60 and sections 88, subsection 1 of the current constitution. We also propose for the insertion of a new third schedule as in draft constitution. Before I take you through the contents of the bill itself, I would want to show you briefly what we currently have in our laws. Section 60 provides for the political parties, but does not impose any obligations on them. In addition, Section 88, as we mentioned, stipulates the composition of the National Assembly, but does not make reservation of seats. Therefore, we ask ourselves, why the need for a constitutional amendment bill? What we intend to do with this exercise is to increase the composition of the National Assembly to cater for reserved seats for women and persons living with disabilities. To impose an obligation also on political parties to promote gender equality in the selection of candidates to contest National Assembly elections. Effectively, the objective of this exercise is to ensure that the gains made in the 2020 draft constitution vis-à-vis women's rights, and in particular, women's political participation, are given legal effect through the amendment of relevant provisions of the 1997 Constitution. The bill we're about to project provides for reservation of specific seats for women to ensure that women enjoy de facto equality with men and women. So these are the sections that I was referring to. The section 60, as we currently have it, as I said, deals with political parties and makes a list of criteria for political parties to participate in elections, but does not make any provisions for reservation. The same with sections 88, as I've highlighted, that just sets out what the National Assembly is composed of. So, what the bill intends to do is to make sure that we attain the objects and reasons that I just mentioned, to impose the obligation on the political parties to increase the composition of the National Assembly. These proposals would ensure that women are assured of at least 16 seats. And you would ask, well, the draft constitution says 14, and you're saying 16. That's because in addition to the 14 seats in the draft constitution, the consultant went further to provide for additional seats for women, to ensure that women have more representation at the National Assembly. We're aiming for at least 22.5% just from the reserved seats. This is beside the numbers that we would envisage to get from the single member constituencies. The proposal that was made by the consultant is for 14 women to be elected, 2 from each administrative area, at least 2 from each administrative area, and 1 woman, two persons, reserved seats for 2 persons with disabilities, at least 1 of whom must be a woman, and also for the nominated assembly members, the number which has been reduced to 2, we'll explain why, at least 1 of whom must be a woman. These are the 16 reserved seats that is being proposed. The ultimate aim is to ensure that as a minimum, women get 30% representation, and hopefully, progressively, will increase to equal representation at the level of the National Assembly. So ideally, we would go to the bill itself. But before we do that, we will just take you through the specifics of the contents as contained in the explanatory memorandum. The introduction to the explanatory memorandum is the long title, and it provides for the scope and overall objective of the bill. It expressly stipulates that it is an act to amend the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia to enlarge the composition of elected members of the National Assembly, to make provision for reservation of seats for women and persons living with disabilities, to ensure that women enjoy genuine de facto equality on an equal basis with men. The first clause is the short title. This simply states the name of the bill. The second clause is the commencement clause. This is necessitated by the fact that Section 91 of the Constitution, which deals with the tenure of seats of the National Assembly, is an entrenched clause and can only be amended through a referendum. Therefore, the term of the current National Assembly cannot be shortened as it was initially proposed in the draft Constitution. So we cannot shorten the term of the National Assembly as it is right now through the proposed amendment because of the fact that that provision is entrenched. The proposal in the draft Constitution to shorten the term was to ensure that both the presidential elections and National Assembly elections were held on the same date. So the term of the National Assembly would come to an end at the end of the term of the presidency. But because that is not the case, we cannot, because the 2020 draft did not go ahead, that proposal cannot be achieved. As a result, this bill can only come into effect for the next general election of members of the National Assembly after the current members have served their full term in accordance with Section 96 of the Constitution. So if this process goes ahead, we're hopeful that by the time the term of the current members expire, the next elections, the Act would come into effect. The third clause deals with the amendment of the 1997 Constitution. It just states the purpose of what we're doing and provides for the amendment of the Constitution itself. The fourth clause is the amendment of Section 60, the section that deals with political parties. This clause seeks to impose an obligation on political parties to respect and promote human rights and fundamental freedoms, gender equality and equity in selecting candidates for National Assembly election. The provision would ensure that political parties would have due regard to gender equality and equity in the process of selecting candidates for the 53-member constituencies provided for in Section 88, as outlined in the proposed start schedule, which we would look at. This would ensure that in addition to the 16 seats that have been reserved for women, we would also be accorded the opportunity to compete with men on an equal basis for these seats that are proposed by political parties. The ultimate aim, like I said, is to promote gender equality, to protect women from discrimination, and to ensure maximum representation for women at the National Assembly level. This provision should ensure the progressive realization of equal representation of women at the level of the National Assembly. The fifth clause is the amendment of Section 88, the section that provides for the composition of the National Assembly. The clause seeks to amend Section 88 of the 1997 Constitution by enlarging the composition of the National Assembly to provide for reserved seats for women as specified in the proposed third schedule. The proposal would ensure that women would have a minimum of 16 seats, like I've mentioned. The proposal also maintains the requirement for the President to nominate 2 members of the National Assembly. However, that number has been reduced from 5 to 2. That is the proposal that is being made. For the sole purpose of ensuring compliance with Section 93 of the Constitution, which deals with the nomination, the election of the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker from among the nominated members. So therefore, we do not want to flout the Constitution by going through this process. So in order to make sure that we fulfill the condition for those members that need to be elected from among the nominated members, we have reduced the number to 2 to say at least one of those 2 people needs to be a woman. The 6th clause is the 3rd schedule itself. Yes. Section 93 is entrenched, like I said. We would have to go through a referendum, and we don't have the time to do that. That is why this bill is proposing for 2 nominated members to be appointed by the President instead of 5. The 6th clause is the 3rd schedule. This clause proposes the insertions of a 3rd schedule immediately after the 2nd schedule. We have 2 schedules in the current Constitution. This will be in line with the proposed amendment of Section 88. So the 3rd schedule will refer to Section 88, and it would stipulate the proposed composition of the National Assembly as follows. 53 persons elected from single-member constituencies as demarcated by the Boundaries Commission. 14 women, 2 elected from each administrative area. 2 persons elected by persons with disabilities from amongst the members of the Federation representing such persons, at least one of whom shall be a woman. We hope both will be women. 2 members nominated by the President, at least one of whom shall be a woman. So, yes, so this is a sum of what this bill that we are validating here today contains. And the next slide just shows us the bill as it is. The explanatory memorandum was trying to explain to you this, the act that you're seeing before, the bill that you're seeing before you today. And this is the framework of the proposed amendment bill. The long title is the phrase that starts with an act to amend the 1997 Constitution of the Gambia to enlarge the composition of elected members of the National Assembly to make provision for the reservation of seats for women and the persons with disabilities and for connected matters. The 4th clause, like I mentioned, is a short title that gives name to the bill, meaning the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia Amendment Act 2021. The commencement, like I said, is what gives effect to the bill that is being proposed. So this act shall come into force on the next general election of members of the National Assembly in accordance with Section 96 of the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia, in this act referred to as the Constitution. The 3rd clause is the amendment of the Constitution that just states what we're doing or what this purpose is intended for. The 4th clause is the amendment of the Constitution. And like I've shown you the structure of Section 60 before, we're proposing that we would insert immediately. It has only 3 sections. So immediately after the 2nd subsection, we're proposing to insert a 3rd subsection that reads, every political party shall promote gender equity in selecting candidates for election, having due regard to subsection 4 below. Subsection paragraph B, respect and promote human rights and fundamental freedoms and gender equality and equity. Subsection 4. So we're proposing to insert 2 new subsections. Nothing contained in the 3rd schedule shall be construed to exclude women, a woman, or a person with disabilities from contesting an election for a single-member constituency, whether as an independent candidate or a member of a registered political party. So while we're making sure that we impose that obligation on political parties to encourage them to present female candidates, we're also making sure that they put at the back of their minds that nothing contained in the proposal that we're making under Section 88 excludes a woman from being nominated to participate in an elections under a political party. Then we would renumber the sections because then we're inserting new subsections, so the numbering of the section as it currently is would change. The fifth amendment is the amendment of section 88. It reads, section 88 of the Constitution is amended by substituting for subsection 1 the following new subsection. So section 1, if you can remember, is the section that talks about the 53 members and also talks about the 5 nominated members. So we're saying we'll do away with that. And then in place of that, we will replace it with the National Assembly shall comprise the number of persons specified in the third schedule representing the constituencies therein specified. And then we have the third schedule itself. And the third schedule specifies the constituencies for National Assembly elections. And it reads, for purposes of election to the National Assembly, the members shall be from the following constituencies. 53 persons elected from single-member constituencies as demarcated by the Boundaries Commission, 14 women, 2 elected from each administrative area, 2 persons elected by persons with disabilities from amongst the members of the Federation representing such persons, at least one of whom shall be a woman, 2 members nominated by the President, at least one of whom shall be a woman. This brings us to the end of this presentation, and I thank you all for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Sukay. I think that was a very brilliant presentation, and I would actually urge you to give her another round of applause. She did very well. Yes, yes, absolutely. This is a young lady. She's just been called to the bar, and she's in my office as a pupil. And I don't think I could have done it better. I don't think I could have done it better. So this is what we do. We try to empower the young lady so that at least we have the next generation of women's rights activists. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, thank you. All right, thank you. All right. So now the bill has been presented. You've been given the background, the context, the explanatory memorandum, everything you need to know, the rationale for what we have in front of you today. So the ball is now in your court. I believe the floor is open. Is Antitabu around? The floor is open, and we'll be happy because at the end of the day, as I said in my presentation, we have a draft. It's not final. You've been given the context, the background. Feedback is relevant, so that at least the final product will be the ownership of everyone here. Because once you validate it, you're part of it. And you have a responsibility to go around, to promote it. Like I said, it's going to be published, and this is not a single endeavor. It must be a joint endeavor for the women of the Gambia on a non-partisan basis in the best interest of the women and the country as a whole. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Jai. I think, as he said, this is the bill. The floor is now open for any questions, any contributions, and so that at least you will feel that you're consulted. We are validating it, but really it's just to enrich the document. And I hope that we will contribute effectively, and let us all be objective towards this process. And as the previous speaker said, let us not take it as on partisan basis. This is in the interest of Gambian women. And I want each and every one of us here, whether a woman or a man, to take it as yours. If you are a man, this is a bill for your wife, for your daughter, for your aunt, and for your sister from another mother. Huh? A sister from another mother who is not your biological mother, but a female or a woman of this great nation of ours. So please, and above all, to your legacy, especially our fellow National Assembly members. Yeah, you have to leave a legacy. Because you came into power with a promise to the Gambian people. And the promises are having some challenges, we all know. But this one, let it be your legacy. Please leave the National Assembly, and in your old age, you could sit and tell your grandchildren, when I was a National Assembly member, I passed this historic bill. I contributed to the passing of it. So on that note, I will just summarize it for the benefit of our members who do not understand the English. So li ñu doon waxtaanee fii rek mooy lii loi boo xam ne dañ bëgg a mu jaala te loi bi interest maanaam njëriñi jigéen ñi la pour jigéen ñi ni ñoo yëngatu ci politique bi ñoom itamit ni mun a am toogu ci National Assembly bi ak ci political parties yi ñoo represent yi ñoo toppa te toogu yi ñu ngi ko jëlee juróom fukki toogu yi ñu am ak ñetta laaluñ ci dara dañ ko faa bàyyi kum neex mun ngaa dem nga xëccoo foofu waaye dañ bëgg rek di pour indi yeneen fukki toogu ak juróom benn yoo xam ne ñu ngi ko jëlee ci tunda yi ci administrative regions yi maanaam CRR URR LRR West Coast and North Bank KM and Banjul so toogu yooyu noonu jigéen rek ñoo faa toog ñooy comme like président bi ni mu amee benn toogu pour ruur Gambia yëpp jigéen ñi tamit am ñaari toogu ci tunda bu nekk lii moom lañ indi pour waxtaanee ko pour jàppalante ndax mu jàlla ndax jigéen ñi tamit mun a am nu ñoo yëngatoo ci biir néegi député yi at least mandinka man Sénégal moo tax bugguma wax balaa ma fay saaga nit Binta translate loolu rek shortly
yo ala baraka muluntana ko take yemin kacha doron ko ngadi amu doron ay me a follow me na kewolu ali ajo ko nyimbilo al nga pus aita kato ndata ta rek ali ajo ko al do muso al koto al ba ali yaka wolle so o kuma ya tabakere ako wala explain te o to kuma to jam fara ba kedal ya dadiya ala
thank you yow naa la utal nen nga naan sa baat bi moom dangay waar ok fi nekk nii ñu ngi ibi rek jataay bi pour koo xam ne bëgg nga lool laajte bëgg nga cee yokka bëgg nga cee wàññi ñu waxtaanee ko rek ok waaw language boo bëgg a laaka rek mun nga koo laaka ok all right mais
asalaamaaleykum gannaaw bi ma sante yàlla julli si yonent bu sell bi maa ngi kontaan trop pour ñëw fii fekk fi sumay naataango jigéen di njëkk a sant nag bu baax a baax a baax a baax a baax Miss Bangoura di la wax ne macha allah danga ma impress bés ma rongo ñi sax bëgg a root bi ma la gisee ngay wax yal na la yàlla jàppale waaye loolu yépp ngir mbaande boobu yépp Janet Salla Njaay moo ko moom dëgga sista Janet ñun amuñ sa fay yàgg nga di liggéeyal jigéeni Gambia man xam naa ci dara moo tax fu ma la fekka damay róol red carpet bi rek nga dox nim la neexee Njaay jërëjëf Tabu ñu ngi laa wax ne jërëjëf jënd plateforme di acknowledge the presence of Salima Ndiaye tamit di ko wax ne ko jërëjëf moom i tamit mu ngi liggéey bu rafet waaye nag ñu ne ku nekk loo moom ñu jox la ko suma raka ji honorable Tuma Ndiaye maa ngi laa wax ne jërëjëf maa ngi laa wax ne jërëjëf si kaw sa kanam mu ñaar rek yàlla baax na di nuyu jigéen ñi ñëpp waat di leen jox seen wàccuwaay di leen wax ne lii man su doon dama ko jox tur dama wax ne ñu ne jigéen juddu na ñu ne jigéen juddu na parce que soo leen seetloo wax biñ fi wax yépp di nga gis ne protocole si nga xam ne yépp Gambia wax na ko ak naataangoom yi nga xam ne ñoo nekk ci biti lu mel ni Maputo protocole si lu mel ni CEDEAO yépp Gambia dafa mel ni moom su ñëwee rek daf koo jël def ko ci draw bi bàyyi ko mu pënde yàgg naa di wax ne Gambia kenn gënut leen a am luwaa yu gën pour jigéen suñ génnee dañuy waxtaan ak seen naataango yi waxtaan yu rafet suñ ñëwee rek ñu jël ko dugal ko ci draw bi ne ñii ñu ngee nelaw oyewooguñ waaye bañ gisee lu mel ni jënd plateforme bi gis ku mel ni Janet Sala ñoom ñëpp ñu jóg fu mu nekk war ñoo jàppale dara warut ñu lu dul ñu jël partisan politics teg ko fële te xam ne lii pour suñ doom yi la ëllëg maa ngi leen di ñaan ku nekk dafa am ci parti boo jógee man kenn gënumaa bëgg suma parti waaye ku nekk gis na ne suñ génnee sax di wax affaire yu rafet la dañoo jël parti teg ko fële nit samay naataango laa àndal te nit ki nag soo àndee sa naataango di def dara da ngeen war a gore nañ leen ñu gore bu ñu Janet Salla Njaay ak jënd plateforme bi gën a gore nañ leen ñu gore ñu am benn kàddu ñu ànd ak lii te jël partisan politics teg ko fële su politique bi jotee waay ku nekk ku xam sa ku mun sa bàyyi xam nga ko waay su politique bi jotee ñu génn ci biti su ko defee ñu defante fa si ngor ak ci taraanga man nag kontaan bu amut àppa loolu dinaa ko fi feeñal fukki yoon ak juróom-ñaar te suma mento bii di Ramsiya Diab xam na ko parce que du ma def dara lu mu yëgut Ramsiya maa ngi la acknowledge di la wax ne jërëjëf yow it ma am nag ay questions yoo xam ne bugga naa koo laajte parce que su affaire yi jigéen jotee dañ ko war a segga di ko seggaat parce que fuñ toog waxtaan dara buñ génnee ñu génn si bem jeex tak kuy wax rek da ngay waxal dëgg te yàlla tax liñ fi wax nii yépp tey buñ génnee niñ fi nangutoo yépp suñ génnee juróom fukka yépp di nga gis ñu jël ko sànni ko ci mbalit mi ñu delluwaat taxawaat di startaat si kanam ñun bañ jógee ñun rafet la ne lii dañ koo taxaw pour def ko bi nga xamee ne draft bill bi demut dañ oote ñun ñëpp ñu taxaw suma memba sang fi ñoom Mariam Cissé ñu yëpp a ngi fi ñoom Aïssatou Ndiaye a ngi fi ñoom kii Diallo ñu ngi fi Madi Cissé lañ oo waxtaanam moom ñu ne private bill la ñoo def moom mu ne dinañu jàppale rafet la ne li si war yëpp dinañ ko def dinañ génnee suñ aleel dinañ ko si def ñu door di waxtaan ñi nga xam ne ñoom itamit ñoo xam lu waa waaye ba lii génnee ma dégg si tabu ma xam ne nit ku déggu la ci affaire jigéen ma dégg si Janet Salla Ndiaye ma ne Aïssatou Ndiaye mu ne ma ne ko dara warut ñu fu mu nekk lu du dellu gannaaw parce que li ñoo ut rek moom la ñuy di def te yëpp a benn la te suñu neexoon duñ ko def dañoo génn di si dijuwante ñoom waaye dama xam ne ñu ne comme li may wax rek ku nekk xam nga ku mun sa baay kon Janet Salla Ndiaye mii bu jógee di taxaw si affaire jigéen ñi Tabu Ndiaye ranga ko moom i tamit ñu jóg pour taxaw si affaire jigéen ñi wax dëgg yàlla ñun dara warut ñu lu dul màndu dem toog di leen déglu ak jàppale leen rek kon maa ngi laajte ne dama déggoon ñuy wax fii ne waaye gis naa léegi ñu rectify ko ñuy wax ne 14 jigéen waaye dégg naa léegi si Tabu ci biir waxam wax na ne 16 jigéen parce que 8 regions lañ am 8 regions lañ am te CRR bi nga xam ne north ak south bi nga xam ne dañ leen dee bugg a jël def leen benn loi bi moo leen jël def leen ñaar kon foofu boor bu nekk ñaar ñoo fa war a jógee waaye loolu gis naa ne Tabu ba mu jógee wax na ko may laajte ci ne jigéen ñi nga xam ne ñaari jigéen bu nekk ñu ne mooy jógee si région yi naka lañ leen di tànnee nañ leen ko wax ba mu set naka lañ leen di tànnee ba pare buñ leen tànnee ba pare ndax ñooñu tam buñ demee toog ci parlement bi ndax xam nañ ne nekkuñ fa pour njiiroo ya njaaroo ñoom mi neen ci benn plateforme lañ jógee ma ne nañ leen ko wax mu leer waay nañ leen ko wax mu leer parce que li xew tey Banjul suñ waree génn ne dañoo génne ñaari jigéen ndax political party bu nekk mooy ñëw indi nit naka lañ leen di tànnee loolu des na si jigéen ñi man maa ngi wax ne ñu góorgóorlu ba plateforme bii bu ñu raw suñu plateforme bii rawee lii dootuñ ko amati loolu buñ eboo ñu xam man nag su ma amoon lu ma gënal duñ ko emale rek si MPC dañ ko yóbbu tuddi regional local level tamit waaye xam naa ne lu mu yàgga lii raam sa ñàkk bala jëm te maa ngi leen di ñaan Tabu yéen tamit fu ma taxaw si suma plateforme si dama ko dee wax lu important lu mel nii suñ ko amee di wax waxi jigéen ñi ngir yàlla ak Rasulullah ñu jël engrais bi ñu bàyyi ko xam naa ne lu mel ni loi duñ ko mun a ñàkk ñoom duñ mun a ñàkk wax si engrais waaye bépp waxkat boo xam ne dafa war a wax war na ko wax si engrais parce que waxi jigéen ñi la ñoo wax te jigéen ñi ñoo fi ëppa te ñi fi ëppa nag ci jigéen ci réew mi fii mooy jigéen ñi nga xam ne jànguñ te ñoom ñoo represent te li ñoo wax nañ koo xam parce que ñoom ñooy génn pour sànni ñi nga xam ne ñooy taxaw su fekkee ne bu nga ne ñi successful su école ñu jàppee ko si local language bi local language bi si dafa important lu ko mooy parti si seen bopp dinañ ko undermine parce que nit ñi nga xam ne ñoo war a sànni karta mooy jigéen ñi nga xam ne jànguñ ñoom la ñoo taxawal te dañ war a dégg li ñuy wax waaye suñ fi nekkee ku nekk jóg di wane ne maa fi gën a dégg angale bu ñu yàkkee man nit ma jóg taxaw wax ko si subidiis ak jaamaan parce que kenn gënuma koo dégg kon maa ngi leen di wax ne jërëjëf.
Thank you very much jërëjëf Mayor waaw dégg nañ sa kaddu waaye suñ proposal bi ñu def rek mooy bill bi du nekk rek ci angale dañ koo translate ci local language si ndax ku nekk mun a xam bill bi lan la ku nekk mun a understand bill bi lan la because comme ni nga ko waxee rek ànd naa yow jigéen ñi ci ëppa doole jànguñ waaw waaye mbiri loi ñu war koo téebul fokk rek ñun suñ loi yi ci nasaraan lañ ko def so fokk rek ñu demee noonu waaw waaye bi rest assured ne loolu yëpp ñu ngi ko factor in ci process bi parce que lii dañ bëgg a jigéen bu nekk moom ko te du jigéen ñëpp a jànga ànd naa ci yow ok my honorable
okay thank you very much ala baraka bake ngamaram panansi mandinga kan fo baral ko kaw kan kodi because otherwise I'll have to speak English and then come back hanga kudanta ne jijang al nimbara bake ala baraka kontanta bake pour que mabe yalla be ñim be wato bi because comme do ya fa ñame ñimu banko la interest lati amange politique party kuti yo adun lafta min kafla je fana amanke juso fananti ni nga samba juso la don wala ka gambe din la ku jamaati ñaar ni ya wulindi to ka juso kije ne juso kije don aka tiñale yes kana bilo nyinto nga observation men kije wala mo inti dawada nimbe act kala je nga bil kije because amanke act follow ni atambita député bu la don otumo intelbe act kala je Planjang political party shall, every political party shall promote gender equity. So now faham bag, gender equity. But none the B, every political party shall respect and promote human rights and fundamental freedoms, gender equality and equity. Yes, gender equality, we can respect. Remember, amanjaw pro nga respect, to respect equality and to respect equity. But remember, mira la wala minti kwa ninga ata stage by stage. Because niko bagal equality right now, ngalo nako, abia mobisiala. But niko equity, comme below fangala spirit momenti. Allah moment below to wala minti ko. Na at least 16 women kafu député bunut amero mu equity let amanke equality so ninga clean choose nga ke equity nga equality bondi je jigita la ko that will be appealing mo jama bi content la wala yes instead of shall then auto nga ki je may but all the same na left the balance shall to je because it's just respecting respecting it. Na observation flanjang bene diamo so en le ka nana ta député bu de lebe ko be ka chala je so ngala ne ko eventually fine je observation flanjang wala 2 persons elected by persons with disabilities from amongst the members of the federation representing such persons, at least one of whom shall be a woman. And then 2 members nominated by the president, at least one of whom shall be a woman. Nindula fulo nga comment sotoje. Nin 2 persons me along ko disability community ba a select la. As a fete nyame, all mean ko you must be a member of the federation. For a mariye ke federation la moti. Ndumbe ngalon ne ko mobe buka register in the federation. At men for mang register and they are disability members, ye nyanto sotole to be elected and and to vote and be elected by the constitution. So nyanta auto koros la kende. Nyanta je koros la. Flanjang 2 members. This is Telinga Republic Lesotho. The Gambia is a republic. And Bakar Gane Puru monarchical tendency me along Molia di president la bring independence. Now delete. All I mean to go president come nominate. Gambia di le carte of president to become president. Akeda president. So Gambia di le nyanta carte of la mol fane pour que député. So momo be duna député bunto nimbe progressif la mbita kan nyato. Momo be duna député bunto banko di le nyante nat la je. Just like region be mol nat la nyame, fédération mol be mol tombo na nyame, mol le nyanta mol tombo na ke nati par président manyana mo nat la. So ngamere nu albo 5 members be alba be delete la jele. Ali adun DJ nyama me alonko aussi musol sinano député buntu nyame asatra manke président la nomination. Because président kay lefto dabon le prime mol buntu député buntu ay karna député bun influence. O molina diamu ba fa ko président le nati o ka diamu président to la yala e ka président le interesse ça. So ningo to fana jube ngawo 5 members aka men nati ngaw amendment ki je kaje ko ngo fana bondi je o comme draft constitution fa ya invité je nyala. So ntenga mera wo mu kulti me alon ko nyanta je koros malom fo mojama maybe I'll translate no, but those are my reservations. Thank you.
Yo assalamu alaikum be jama mo be konton na momo itola ani konton momo bota fanna men na kere konton dirobe na jabiro me lafta fola ko moñin kono wolem nyinti ko mfana mbeka fula mol kono le mi yalon ko be nyim fasala le bayra musolda nyaato tale fudi yo lafta nyinin karo sotola comme meyo e men nyinin ka jang bari na fasaro fanan kono abe kelan tolla konkili naletin tol minu bijang medani rokela e député bungo be kili ye sindi comme yen tolu kacandi minu la ye kacandi wo fananna isaje be si londo soto je mi yalon ka seneyata anin fulan jamo fanan député bungo to fanna bi jele mi yalon ka marata musol la alandaro jati kende anin ku kotengolu e ka fo me select committee on health, women, children, refugee and humanitarian relief mbela fila yewolu kili iniye kacha ko nyinna bake anin committee on human rights mi yalon ko honorable tumanjaabe wala kono mbela fila yewol dundi kacha nyin kono bake wol fanansi moño député kachandi ko nyinna comme londo nyin si seneyamma jannin soma abinaji mbete sonna pour ka fasa adun jikita ko kewol minu bem fejang ibelo lam fele ya fasa bake ko mewe nyinin karo men kem fana lafta wala nyinin kala ntol be musu sifa juma lel tombonna ke kenyim place oto bari nkana musol dundi kele wulole kono mbe ngalo nako Gambia political sign ni kata politicien oti muso muyti kidi kan wala katu kuma le kuma adun kidi kan o memmu amanke kidi kan deri ngoti abuso e mbelema bari mbe ngalo ko ni muso kumbota sera kunda muso le kumbota banjun adun Gambia musol be kumbo kan ne sonda molto e nyaadalto bari musola integrity momenti amanke dendi ko dammati ala malo mala integrity tile bari ni kata politicien oti bi kunu e manji ko men soto ni kata aren idunta aren nanyun kono iba soto lale chagolem bandiolem ay nana fulole sunya nka bele moy mbela fila ale media fanan kili bari nganna media personnel doji janne Fatou remi yalon ka fanan ka mamman kuwol kono fane ke molti min yale be mol karandila mol nyanta musol face ala politiko kono nyame nyim banko musol nyin député bu ngoto musol minu bije mo tije membu ka keno iba fala do betiata karangola karolla do betiata yamarola karolla do betiata de darola karolla bari mbekal lodu latala alhamdulillah hani dingol men ke wulu la makamol buka kanyam bari bekal lodu la soto e kaminta oto kamala mbenyi musol min tombon nan kana singa fo kari man kete ninga ke dron karan na fanante nyaato ta soto la bari nyaaji be carte fay dingol jamal mu karam balol leti adum bi nyin discrimination o start tam fa wala family le kono oto ali nga start nga deda muso e sidinke wulu yedi muso wulu nim pano kete be data karam bu ngoto nata dinke o nana ta be fo nyondi na la tara studies la dim muso be boli ko la be doku wala fengo be akilina ba akela waranto hani yeb dimo wulu ko ay muna wulu muso e ko man fe wulu aka commencé wolto woyel lamfundi ba kele nga try mbe musol semben tu yala nyamen ni muso nati nan député bu ngoto fana man ka nyande e nyanta lola fele yama koy sa ko momi yalon kana na ma fanji jal ye mol sikana banta dron ka ko ngi samana ngeke député oti hani ama belon député bu ngolun karangole ka kije lungoli ka kukuta la jije alinge ma ko ngi guide nimmel lafta mistake la wala aja ero ka kumanda fa he nyinti nyate bule nga kete nga bar nendiro nen kuma kan ota bondila ale political party fanam fo na kata luwati nga continue kay tandila ko ni nyanta musol men londile kana musol londi dro yasika yas londi kafo nyato ibe duma juloma le be mol nyor la kan ye fanke ko man ku kalam ta atra men ka tabiya be lonne woton tian kilo to wolto baba bake nganna musolu fasa muso nyaaji bondila mam beteya ninga musol sembentu ya nyim banko kam fama bana faaje la barnte sembentu ya non nimmal loy fen tol minu nge londin tol lebelu la ngan tewo siti nge ma koy bare musol landi dron abante bulo bantabal amanji ko men soto kunun iba tumilale ba nondilal adum nyim minu ka musol la nyanto kele nyim kuma kawol minu ka fa musol la ni nyin tiñaari jawol ni nyim mantorol ngamre fane waji bostol pour ka findi ka kondem bari ke woni muso malu nyaman kiliya ni ke wonen ko do la ke kon kon na tambe bari muso do be niya kala be doyala la be kide la tela fila ka findi kotake antol minu dalta lan tol ngake na soltin kanku wala ni ya fanya fambu ka kalam tabar minu binabe kele problem mol woto mbe woto dani la baake ala bara.
We have a few issues that have been raised that we may need to respond to. Like Auntie Tabu had said, I know we're all emotional and sentimental about this whole women's rights issues, women's participation. But our focus and attention should be on the bill that is in front of us, because it is the bill that we are validating. And I am sure that after we validate this bill, when you all go back to your different constituencies and platforms, there are a lot of things that you're going to say to them. These are all arguments you bring forth to actually reinforce the relevance and importance of the bill so that you can sell the bill properly. So some of the sentiments that have been expressed here by the mayor and the previous speakers all relate to rationale, background, and the reason why we need to have this bill. So I think it's because we realize that there are problems and challenges. That is why we have a bill. So what we want to see is to see the bill, look at it, and ensure that it meets that requirement. If it is deficient in any respect, we exchange ideas and see how we can improve on it. But not to stifle debate, not to stifle you expressing your sentiments. Bugun ngeen ne dañoo wax ne bugun ngeen wax parce que xam ne lii loo xam ne dafa nekk loo xam ne dafa wér ak ñor nit ñi ku nekk am nga lu bari loo bëgg a wax waaye li na ñaan rek mooy ñu seet kayit bi bill bi ñu seet li nekk ci bill bi na problème yi ñoo jànkuwanteel na bill bi adresse na ko su ko adresse ñu improve bill bi suñ ko jëlee nag ba pare li ngeen a bëgg a wax fii nii yëpp di ngeen ko mën a wax soo leen delluwaatee because am sure am ngeen platforms am ngeen constituencies am ngeen women's meeting yooyu yëpp di ngeen fa mën a discuss loolu but li ma def mooy ñu jëm a respond rek tous ñi nga xam ne affaire bill bi la njëkka den suñ paree ñu yóbbu bill bi clause by clause so that ñu mun koo valider because lu ko may mu nañ fa toog tey ba ëllëg óor na ma ne yéen ñëpp ku si nekk am ngeen loolu bëgg a wax te kon du dem parce que xam nga suñ fonda si tamit dañ am time limit comme ni ko Auntie Tabu waxee war nañ fa jógee by now so benn question bu important la mais bi laajtoon bala moo dem mooy jigéen ñi naka lañ leen a tànnee loolu important la waaw dafa important waaye liñ def mooy day reserve seat si pour jigéen waaye political party bu nekk yaa indi sa jigéen nag or you could be an independent candidate so electoral laws yëpp dañoo comply with it seats dañ ko reserve they've been reserved for women the seats have been reserved for women but party soo ñëwee mën ngaa ñëw si turi parti mën ngaa ñëw as an independent candidate mel ni comme for example Banjul South am na party representative am na independent representative even at the level of the presidency also you can belong to a party you can be independent same sarta yooyu la ñu toppa the same rules those are the same rules that we follow because this is not about civil society representation. For example, the honorable member talked about the issue. I don't speak Mandinka, but I can speak a few words that why should we get the federation to elect? This is a representation of an interest, vulnerable interest group. It's not generally, and we don't want political parties to hijack that. Exactly. So if you really want to, I think what is important is, if you want to take part in the political process, you must organize. And how do you organize? By forming platforms. Because if we didn't have a gender platform, we would not be here today debating this bill. If every woman in every constituency wanted to speak, there won't be a basis for having a bill. But because there's a gender platform, there's an organized body. That's why we're able to galvanize support, come together, think strategically, and bring something forward. So with regard to the representation of the disabled, persons living with disability, a conscious step has been taken that those who have been there in the struggle, fighting and supporting, because in every representation, you cannot have direct democracy. You must have some form of representative democracy. That's why we have you as a National Assembly member seeking our interests at the National Assembly. So this is the rationale and the background. So it may not be the ideal, but under the circumstances, it's the best we can do. You also mentioned the issue of the nominated members. Ideally, we'll do away with it. But if you are listening to the background, we said that the only reason why we're maintaining it is because there is a provision in the Constitution that says that the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker should be from the nominated members. And that is an entering clause. We cannot change entering clauses here because you have to go to referendum. So just listen to the context. That's why we took the time to take it to the background and the context, to explain why. So that is why we said we are incorporating the proposals in the draft to a limited extent with slight modification. The slight modification is that we cannot flout the constitutional provision. So if there is an entering clause, you cannot amend an entering clause through an ordinary bill of the National Assembly. Please, let's just finish. Listen. You cannot amend an entering clause. Well, maybe it's different from what I've seen, but I think it's an entering clause. Look at your Constitution. Go back and look at your Constitution. Okay. So that's the only reason why we have that. Okay? Okay. So otherwise, we would have done away with it. I think when it comes to promoting and respecting, I think we want people to respect equality. It's not just enough to say respect equity. So we're not trying to water down things. We're saying you are promoting gender equality. Because the concern the honorable member had was that it's not possible to have equality today. It's not possible to have equality today, but it's possible to promote it and respect it. Yes. And progressively attain equality. Yes. So if you don't acknowledge that you must respect and promote equality, you'll never be there. You will continue talking about equity. So we're talking about respect and promote gender equality. So you are respecting and promoting. And we want it to be a mandatory obligation. We don't want it to be discretionary by using may. So it's a mandatory obligation. Even with the mandatory obligation, sometimes it's difficult in terms of implementation. So we want to actually put that in the mindset of political parties, that as of now, respect and promote. And what we want is, because these seats have been reserved for women, political parties may have the tendency to say, but you already have your seat, so we don't need women single-member constituency. We don't want that. The women who are brave enough, are strong enough, and are empowered enough to contest on an equal basis with men should still be out there doing so, in addition to the equal. That is why we say promote and respect gender equality in the selection of candidates. So it's like I'm trying to close all the loopholes, because somebody will just say, no, but you have your seat, so we don't need to. No. The international obligations, and in fact, most importantly, the Constitution actually secures and guarantees the right of a woman to participate on an equal footing with men. So political parties must respect that, and that's what we are saying, respect and promote that. So don't rely on the reserve seats to say we don't need women anymore, therefore. So that is the rationale behind it. That is the rationale behind it. So we agree with you, and maybe that was the rationale that was taken by the Constitutional Review Commission in the proposal. Because what you have in the draft constitution, like I said, they're just proposals. They're not part of the laws of the Gambia. And if you look at the recent constitutional developments, like you rightly observe, in a democracy and a republic, most countries have done away with nominated members for the same reasons that you have said. But here, we're constrained because of those provisions. So anything that is entrenched, for example, the proposal in the draft constitution to have elections of both National Assembly members and the president the same day cannot be implemented because the term and the tenure of National Assembly is an entrenched provision. You cannot amend that through a bill and amending the constitution. I'm sure you're very familiar, I have no doubt with your level of knowledge, that you're very familiar with the procedure for amending the provisions of the Constitution and which provisions are very difficult to amend also. Thank you. What else? So what I will do is, I want to crave your indulgence. Dama leen a ñaan ngir Yàlla yónnee taba ngeen baal ñu parce que xam naa ne ku nekk bëgg nga wax léegi dañoo project bill bi clause by clause su ko fee ñu mën a focus ci bill bi clause by clause ngeen seet bill bi ngeen wax ñu lan ngeen ci bëgg ak lan ngeen ci bëggut su ko fee suñ paree bu ñu mee yëpp ngeen ne d'accord ngeen yëpp parce que bill bi explain na leen explanatory memorandum we've given you the objects and reasons of the bill and why. So each clause until we're done with that. If there are any additional follow-up action, because this is a process, this is not the only law that may need amendment. But we all know that, really, if you really want to have legal impact, your starting point with the Constitution. Because once you have the constitutional framework fixed, then every other law actually follows suit. That's the beauty of being able, because we've given you all the proposals. We said, amend the Women's Act, amend the Elections Act, have a standalone legislation, but all of them constrained by the constitutional provisions. So the starting point will be amending the Constitution, then progressively, maybe another initiative will come to amend the Elections Act to reinforce, because the Constitution also always gives enabling provision to say an act of the National Assembly may make further provision. So once we amend the Constitution, then the next step will be, I'm sure, to look at other relevant laws, to amend them as vis-a-vis representation in the National Assembly. So I just implore you, you said bill bi ci bopam lu ko may dinañ fi nek ba ëlëk quoi bill bi gudut lu gàtta la waaye lu lim ëmba dafa bari. So discussion mun naa am loo xam ne lu am solo la nekk if that is acceptable. I think am na ñoo xam ne sax seen participants ñu ngi ma door di wax ne ma nañ look at bill bi nañ seet bill bi, so let's do that. In fact, it's not even a bill, it's a draft bill. Because it's only when we publish it and everything and goes through the process. But that's too technical. For now, the draft proposals. No, the bill is there, it's bill. What we tend to do as women's advocates, we keep talking to ourselves, to each other, preaching to the converted. When you preach with the intention of converting somebody who has not been converted. So we have to be participatory and inclusive, and I dare say be feminist. Feminists are always open-minded. Feminists are inclusive. Feminists are participatory. People don't like feminism when they say it, but it's just a principle. You respect people, respect people's ideas, and respect people's thoughts, and don't shout anybody down. So please, I'm appealing. Otherwise, this meeting would degenerate, and I wouldn't want that to happen. I don't want that to degenerate. Please, let's respect each other's views, please. So I think that aspect has been dealt with. Let's move on, please. Now I want to be a dictator. Let's move on. I need to go home, honestly. Okay. No, but can you sit down, please? Yes, you need to sit down. Yes. Thank you very much. Just sit down and wait for your turn. You're not the only one here. Other people have been raising their hands too. No, if you are saying the same thing, thank you very much. We acknowledge what you want to say to support that. I think our responsibility was to have a discussion with him. And he's on board. Let's move on, please.
I'm still behind.
Sorry? Which wagon? You have something?
I have a concern that I want to raise here.
The same concern?
No, not the same concern. No, I just want to... What I'm going to say, help us.
Any comments on this? Nothing contained in the third schedule shall be construed to extra a woman. Can we just calm down? Can we calm down? The honorable member has spoken. So do we have anybody who has the same views as the honorable member? I think if we listen to each other, we'll agree. Do you have anyone who has the same views as the honorable member and still does not understand based on the explanation I've given? If you have the same views as the honorable member, then I'll allow you to speak. But if you've accepted the explanation I've given you. That means that you are on board. Then we move on. So Honorable, what's his name? Gentleman? Today, do you have a contrary view? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. We move on. 5. So this is the amendment of section 88, as highlighted by Sukai. And this is where we've inserted. In fact, we'll take both the two clauses together, where we inserted the constituencies for National Assembly elections. If you have any views on this, anybody has a view on it, or any seeking clarification on it? Because a question was asked by the mayor, where are these women coming from? We said the parties will select their candidates. So any comments on that?
Raise a question that there are 8 regions in the Gambia, because CRR was demarcated to CRR North and CRR South. And here we say 14 women will be selected from the 7 regions in the Gambia. So what are we going to do? And my question here is, the regions are bigger in size. When you come to, for example, KMC, would it be chaotic if you have to select 2 people looking at the magnitude of the KMC, or you go to West Coast region and comparing West Coast region and Banjul, can you get 2 people from Banjul and 2 people from West Coast? How are you going to work it out? Will it bring a problem or not? That is my concern. And also the concern that the mayor raised earlier, that we have 8 regions instead of 7. That's my question.
Thank you very much. If you look at the provision, elections are held, if you look at the Elections Act, it deals with administrative areas, not regions. So it is focused on administrative areas. We're not trying to change the elections law and everything. So it's administrative area. And the concern you raised about the population size and density is valid. But that happens everywhere. Sometimes, look at Banjul. Banjul has 3 seats. And look at the density of Banjul. Look at the size of Banjul. So that is beyond this assignment. So that will be the role of the Constituency and Boundaries Commission to work it out and look at the best ways of demarcating constituencies. But what we're doing here is just going by the administrative areas. Okay? Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay. My name is Mohammed Bah. I'm from the civil society. Yes. First is I want to look at the technical aspect of the selection, which is women. If you look at the parties, we have probably 17 parties. And then if we are doing these selections in regions, then it means if each and every party selects one, then you have 17 candidates. And you know that obviously we are going with the ballot drums, and then which might be a logistical nightmare first. I'm just looking at the practical aspect of it. Secondly is looking at the 53 constituencies. These are designated constituencies by law. Now, if you want to amalgamate or merge this thing, probably I am questioning the legality of, or hope it might not be contradicting the Constitution, because these are 53 constituencies, and then you are saying 2 from each region. So you now is region and constituency. So what are the legal basis? Probably there might be a tussle. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I think the concerns you raised about the number of political parties is true for elections to the president, elections for National Assembly members. It's not only about the women representation. So that is not within the purview of this assignment. That is true. It's not only unique to this, 2 women. If you have 17 presidential candidates, 17 parliamentary candidates in any constituency, 17 candidates in any ward, you'll be faced with the same nightmare. So I don't want you to be raising issues that are not unique to this. This is not unique to just this thing. No, calm down. This is not unique to this. That's your first question. Your second question is the constitutionality of having 2 women elected from each administrative area. Yes. What we are trying to do is to amend the constitution. And if we amend it, it's constitutional. That's what we are doing. So right now, we cannot do that. It's not possible to have 2 women from each administrative area because the constitution doesn't say so. So we are proposing to have that. Or once we have it and it goes through, it becomes constitutional automatically. So you will have, for example, single member. So what you're having here is single member constituencies, 53. Then you have what we call super constituencies. In fact, the women who are going to represent, those 2 women from the district, I would say they will even have more legitimacy than the individual National Assembly members because they are representing an entire administrative area. They have the mandate and the vote of an entire administrative area. They're almost like a mini presidents because the president has the mandate of the entire country. These 2 women, wherever they're coming from, will have the mandate of an entire administrative area. So your concern about constitutionality will arise if you want to implement that now without amending the constitution. But once the constitution is amended, it becomes constitutional, and the IEC will have an obligation to fall in line and demarcate those administrative areas. In fact, administrative areas are already demarcated, in fact, because right now they're already existing. IEC works with administrative areas. In fact, that's why you have a returning officer for each administrative area, and they give feedback on it. So those returning officers will be returning 2 women in addition to the people in the country. Is that clear? The 70 political parties does not only affect this bill, it affects the office of the president, it affects the National Assembly members, it affects the councillors. So that logistic nightmare is the responsibility of the IEC. But we cannot throw away this proposal simply because that logistic nightmare is going to happen, especially knowing that that is true for all elections, not only this one. So why are we flagging it now? Is it because it's the women? No, I'm just teasing you. Yeah, okay. No, the IEC right now should deal with how they're going to appoint 17 presidents, 17 ballot box for president, 17 ballot box for no, I'm using your number. I'm just using your number for argument's sake. So you have 17 parties, 17 presidential candidates. So that's the responsibility of the IEC. Let them deal with the nightmare, IEC. You have 17 MPs contesting. IEC need to do that. 17 councillors in each ward. Yaku said it could be more. IEC can do with that. So this bill cannot be stalled just because of that nightmare. So I note it, I recognize it, but it's not something that's within the domain of this bill. So that once IEC solves that problem, whether we're going to have paper ballot or we're going to have the usual traditional ballot to solve the problem, that's a technical issue for IEC, and I recognize it, but it shouldn't stall this bill. Is that okay? Yeah, I understand. I understand. I acknowledge and I take it on board. It is a nightmare. No, I'm not going to pitch you against the women. You're right, absolutely. But it is true not only for this, but for all elections. Absolutely. So do you have any other questions on the schedule? On the schedule, huh? C, yes. Okay, C was raised by an honorable member. So you want to raise similar concern or a different one? Let's see C. Yeah.
So I don't understand C. I want you to elaborate more on C, which says 2 persons elected by persons with disability from amongst the members of the Federation, representing 8 persons, at least one whom shall be a woman.
Okay. So the honorable member raised a similar concern because everybody else is coming from the electorate, the constituencies, from the country as a whole. But with regard to disabilities, because we want to represent a vulnerable group, we want to find an organized mechanism for bringing them on board. We all know that there is a federation, an umbrella body responsible for persons with disability. Okay?
So those who've organized themselves and have been working within the confines of the federation now need to organize and elect. An election will take place. It won't be appointment. They will elect amongst themselves 2 persons. At least one of whom shall be a woman. So it's an election. It's going to be organized by the IEC. It's just that the eligible voters, like the Honorable raised the concern, will be those who are part of that federation. And I said that the reason why we want to do that is that we don't want the political parties to hijack the seat of the persons with disabilities and start, So that's the bit. No, they're already there. They can they can go on board. They can, if they may. Yes, they can. They could go on board and register within the federation. Yes. Okay. Yes. Then they will go to the federation because we want to just have a mechanism for them to come on board. And like I said in my response to the honorable member, I said these days, if you really want to represent a woman, an interest group, even women, you have to organize. You must organize and you must federate. Otherwise, we'll be all over the place. Yeah, that's the thing. So that's the mechanism that has been adopted. Mm-hmm. You want to have a similar question? Or? Persons with disabilities. Yes, persons with disabilities. Mm-hmm.
Assalamu alaikum. Mbe jama mo be kontonna musukafuke menu be jang menu be siri nyaato ntemu Mariama Jammeleti mbe nafa fulale be mbulu jang mbe jam peace and stability for the Gambia memo Cairo anin tenkuo many nying organize mbe tentula mbe jeyila mba fulale ko al nimbara ha na nyinin karo momenti jang bawo ala yen dale mankañan dol mu lanjuro leti wo lanjuro dol beje bukeje dol buke moy dol buka fono so biribe nyin luwa I lafta nyin luwa ya samba député bu ngokon fo wol ñol yewol dabulandi jele bang because mo me alon ko abu kadiamu no ni tare lafta wo lafta contest la be diam aba fang express no la mole nyaadile ka fa ente lafta lolal lafta la nyin kenye so ni luwabe dada la nyantale ngawul fananta ngi da bulandi je they are part and parcel of this society. Ala baraka.
I just have 2 questions to ask in regards to B and C. For C, I was gonna suggest or ask if it is possible for us to do the same thing for B, like that special seats that we were talking about for the women. Why I'm saying is because we don't want an instant where we have the party affiliation overseeing the women's right affiliation. Like, for example, we talk about the methodology of selecting these women. If we say political parties bring women and we go into elections and that political party's candidate happens to win, how are we going to know that these women who were selected for a special interest group of women are representing those women and not the party? So I am thinking, suma xalaat moy ñu seet naka lañoo tànnee jigéen ñooñu si gox yi ba nga xam ne xëj na parti mënut see ñàkk a bokka waaye dinañ xam ne ñoom interest si groupe ñi ñoo leen teg si néegi député yi comme loolu laa nekk di xalaat.
Okay, I think you've raised a very pertinent point, and I think this actually takes us back to the role of a National Assembly member. A National Assembly member, if you look at the ethics, parliamentary ethics, you are elected by, you are presented by your party. But once you are elected and you sit in that assembly, you have a responsibility to act in the best interest of the Gambian people, beyond partisan politics. But unfortunately, not all ethics, even professional, the lawyers don't comply with all the ethics that we are bound by. So you've raised a very pertinent point, because every National Assembly member has a responsibility, but the representation there is wider. And really the ultimate objective of this thing is to promote women political representation, participation. So also we need to also embolden women, empower women to be part of the political process. Otherwise, if we just shelter them or shelter each other, then actually it becomes counterproductive. Hopefully, if you are elected on a partisan basis, on the basis of an administrative area. That may embolden you to the point where the next time you are prepared to take it on an equal footing with a man. Because, mind you, temporary special measures are not supposed to be permanent. Because we don't also want us to be lazy. It's a temporary measure. That's why it's called temporary special measure, with a view to attaining equity. So if you get to the point where society is enlightened, it's all about enlightenment. Then some of those measures will be gradually lifted and amended. So with women representation, I think, in fact, look at the complexity of that. How many women's groups do you have? You have the agricultural group, you have the seamstress group, fashion designers group, and they all count. How are you going to bring them on? It's going to be difficult. So for that one, it won't be easy not to go on a partisan basis. So that's the rationale. That's the rationale for it.
It's now almost 2. We were supposed to, with due respect, we were supposed to finish. We were supposed to finish at 1, and it's almost 2, and we need to have lunch, have prayers, and dialogue a little bit, talk a little bit with each other, and then hopefully this will not be the last time that we meet on this, and disseminate it, talk about it in radio programs, everything, because this is historic. This is historic, because if this is passed, we will not go to international conferences, and our sisters from different countries are talking about how far they have gone in UN empowerment, and we are just there to say that we have a law, but the law is not practical. It will be history, that we will stand and say 2016, when we change government, 2016, when we come as a nation and try to get reform processes, at least the women's bill was passed. Yeah, that's it. And then I would also like to take this opportunity to thank IRI immensely for funding this activity. Robina and her team, Jainaba, they've been in this process since. Wherever she meets me, she will say, anti-taboo, what about the woman? Anti-taboo, what about the woman? And thank you, Robina, that at least we have a bill from the little funding that you have. And thank you for thinking of the gender platform to be part of this process. But also I would like to thank our able consultant, Mrs. Njai, Janet, for coming up, devoting her time to come up with this bill, and giving us the lecture to understand it properly. And all the members of civil society organizations, I know it will eventually end up with government, but this is what civil society is all about. We advocate and we take action. And we support each other, even though when we have our meetings, we disagree and then we end up agreeing. But all the work is geared towards where government cannot reach.
Love like fire. Wow. Love like fire. Xam ngeen rek affaire bi xam ngeen fan la? Skincare la. 2020 lañ wax de. Waaw. Fii nag mooy Kerr fan, Kerr zero tache. Perfect skin. Skincare saa su ne rek niñ ko dee defee rek. Loo lañ soxlaati rek. Maanaam bu ngeen am problème ci seen skin, yéen xam ngeen fan la. Fii ngeen di ñëw. Suma xarit yeeg am di jàmm yi nga xam ne taas daf lañ sonaloon, xam nga doon xeesal ba la ka xum. Éneew ma lañ ko nag waaye just in case comme ni ko gars yi defee rek en cas just in case loolu xew xam ngeen fi ngeen di ñëw skincare plus si yu baax rek la ñoo dox nag ay baax rek fu ne la ñoo dem ci réew mi di lañ indi rek nag products yu baax du Paris du Italie du USA du fi mu nekk nii sax boole nañ ci nag Sweden fu nekk lañ leen a indilee products bu dee tamit nag da nga ñuul rek ñu lay jamaa natural beauty that melanin dripping we do have stuff for you as well emuñ si skincare products rek ñu ngi ci cuub yi tamit fu ne la ñoo jaar in fact sax last commercial bi ñu defoon waxuñ leen woon dañoo dox ci ay kawar 9A grade rek nag waaw we do have bundles as well hair si lu ne la ñoo dox ñun ñu ngi ci rafetal jigéen rek luy taaral jigéen rek waaw boo leen di tukki tamit bëggoon rek classic suitcase dañoo dox ci ay Samsonite duñ dee indi any brand of suitcases though other than Samsonite comme li ma dee wax rek boo eggee airport dëri Samsonite dafa am nuñ laa xoolee waaw ngeen ne lan nag waaw skin ci moom la ñu gën a xamee nag skin care products ci moom la ñu gën a xamee ñu ngi dox tamit bentee tamit si ay dàlla man waaye man nag skin care mooy suma specialty xam nga rek jigéen bu sa xar kanam réglé loo def mu jag am nañ Patricia Reiner, Kiwi Eye, the whole range, Lighten Up Gold, Tomatine. I mean, the list can just go on and on and on and on. Lépp loo xam ne rek luy taaral jigéen la ci yooyu rek la ñoo dox. Skincare plus nag emuñ si Gambia rek ñu ngi United States ñu ngi Gambia fii ba pare bu dee yaa ngi anywhere in Europe mun nañ la ko mail within 3 days rek ñetti fan rek nga jot say diw emuñ si loolu rek dañ laa consult tamit balaa ñu laa jaay diw dinañ def a free consultation pour wax la rek exactly li nga xam ne moo méngoo ak sa kanam dinañ leen wax tamit ne rek am nañ perfumes, you know, fragrances, men's shirts, accessories. We do dresses as well. We do blouses. I mean, we do shoes. Name it, we do them. Skincare Plus 2020 is our year of perfection. Zero task. Fi mu nekk nii réew mi fii kenn waratu fi task kenn waratu fi am problème kanam kenn waratu fi am problème yu picca boo ko amee dafa fekk ne rek ñëwuloo ci place bi fii.
Love, love, love like fire. Bring my love, 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 love like fire.
I get it.
Mbijan aganyadi.
Albaka.
Mbaka important.
Yo, nga transfer la sto.
Ya transfer la sto.
Ha, code nyinji.
Okay. Korsana. Nsila ID soto.
Sa soto. Sorry. I get it.
Mbijan bro.
Albaka.
Mbaka.
Bara alla service o tariya.
Mbare.
Mo ki janna nun kunu bara tariya.
Jannom yona forest de bureau. Gambia tonkon na no mbari ya bere. Birim koyna fo kato.
Bari si kodo kino kato nim fo bolong blabe to.
56 branches mola sota Gambia jam.
Ha?
Gambia kono ani Gambia bantala bankol. Nka kodo kiya bere. Kodo sifa fo falindiro fo nyaadi lafta memmen na kodi to poto nin kodi maraw. Jannam number 1 di nyonta. Andum fana nata anoda enterprise sotale. Wala nyindi ko domorol fana kol fana be firale de dadi ma ni domorol ni fana be teat. Gambia dawda yalo ma fa kendol sotale je.
Wo moyo diat.
Apelenta
ni wo ka ni lafta nyelen kendol e bina.
Yalo bu kanyi la ko la baraka ba.
Yalo ndel chosano lo.
Abaraka.
We live in a day and age where technology is creating a world without borders, filled with unlimited potential to improve the lives of the people around us. Innovarex Global Health ushers in a new way of leveling the playing field with increased access to quality healthcare services delivered at your doorstep. Our qualified professionals are equipped with state-of-the-art point-of-care testing technology to conduct tests such as kidney function, liver function, electrolyte tests, body composition, hemoglobin, A1C, and many more services with the highest efficiency in delivering results. The addition to our flagship, Wellness on Wheels, more fondly known as WOW Delivery Service, brings the entire clinical experience full circle. IGH has remained committed to creating the future of healthcare delivery. Gone are the days of sending loved ones outside the country for basic medical services. Innovarex Global Health offers a new peace of mind and takes pride in delivering the quality of care we all deserve.
When we touch down, better broke down.
With Gamtel G-Fiber, now you can enjoy super fast internet in gigabytes. G-Fiber is affordable, stable, secured, and accessible to homes, businesses, and enterprises. With Gamtel G-Fiber, the future is speed. Gamtel, creating a brighter future in communication.
That's how she became mine and see that.